I was O'Brien County Chair for 3 years, and I'm still in trouble because March 1st, my husband and I moved to Lake Park, so I can't do that anymore. But I still am very attached to O'Brien County Dams in every way possible. I think in those 3 years, we did some amazing things and saw growth, and I think it's seen here again tonight, that this is an amazing turnout in red O'Brien County. To have people here, to hear from some of the people that are willing to make some sacrifices and give up some of their freedom. Just like you guys are all here on a wonderful summer evening because you care about your country, they're taking even more time and fighting to fly here and giving up that. I sent it to Judy, so very good. We're going to, do you still want John to go?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So we are lucky to also, in addition to the Admiral, who you are all going to enjoy hearing from. I was fortunate enough to meet him a few years back in Orange City, and I was on stage with him for maybe 3 minutes, and I thought, wow, this guy is the real deal. And I kind of kept my mouth shut as county chair because I didn't want to persuade anybody. Now that I'm not county chair anymore, I can persuade everybody that they should be for Admiral Franken, no matter if you care about your country at all. He's an amazing man. But I'm going to introduce you to John Norwood. He is running for Secretary of Ag in Iowa. So I'm going to guess we have a few farmers here. Farmers? No? Barry, raise your hand, please. Thank you. It's like, I have to be a farmer's wife. I'm going to make him raise his hand when I say that. So he is a lifelong Tip O'Neill style Democrat. Okay, good thing you got an old room here that they got that. So Tip was Speaker of the House during Ronald Reagan's presidency and famously said, all politics is local. Here in Iowa, John believes that applies to agriculture too. John wants to create a modern vision for Iowa for its highly productive but unbalanced agriculture system. He envisions Iowa being a model of local to global regenerative agriculture. Iowa's community system is a commodity system. I don't have my glasses on, so you're going to have to bear with a little bit here. System is a foundation of our economy, but it's the diversity and resilience we need to add to the land that will ensure its sustainability for future generations. This hits me. Our son moved on to place. He's 4th generation to live on our land. So this, when I read this, right here, so very good. John's professional background and experience include leading an agricultural land trust in grape, nut, and cattle ranching, obviously not in Iowa, that's in California, where he worked closely with growers, ranchers, city and county planners to protect agriculture from development and secure water rights. He has also worked in farm-based renewable energy, specialty feeds, and Iowa-grown staple foods. I think you can see he's got a little background for this job. In Boston, I love Boston too, John worked with the Capital Engineering Department for one of the largest regional water and wastewater utilities in the country. He owns a small business and serves as a small business advisor to the award-winning Goldman Sachs Iowa 10K SB program, where he has mentored nearly 40 Iowa business owners over 4 years. He has 2 decades of service as an elected and appointed board director, as a soil and water commissioner for Polk County, elected in 2017. And in his business capacities, John travels the state regularly to work with business owners in agricultural, technology, manufacturing, and related industries. So you travel for that, and now you're really getting some miles on as he travels around. So we are lucky to have him here today. He will represent our voices, and the many Iowans that he have talked to have told him they want a balanced vision for Iowa that includes thoughtful use of state and federal monies to build a resilient, enduring Iowa for everyone. He calls it Iowa Built to Last. So John's core values include inquiry, rationality, humility, patience, and faith. He has an MBA and master's degree from Yale's Forestry School, as well as a BA from Williams College. For the past 20 years, he and his family have resided in West Des Moines. His son is a graduate of Luther College, and his daughter will be a sophomore in Vanderbilt. There's a quick summary, but now get your questions in your head. After he gives you his talk, you can sure ask those. So welcome, John.
So it's really easy if somebody gives you an introduction, because then you don't have to talk about yourself. That was very helpful. My name is John Norwood, and as Karen mentioned, I'm running for Secretary of Agriculture. I believe it's one of the two most important positions in the state. If we're talking about the direction of the economy, if we're talking about the health of the people, the health of our livestock, the health of our environment. It's all connected in this office. This office is about not just agriculture, the business. It's about water, it's about food, it's about land, it's about people. And so fundamentally, I think we have to understand that the office is very broad. And agriculture is the foundation of this state. I mean, it's more than half of our economy. It's a reflection of our heritage. It really should be what urban and rural. And unfortunately, because of some of the recent history, it's become more of a divisive part of the economy. And so part of what we need to do is bring it together, bring urban and rural interests together. It's almost the yin and the yang, bringing things into balance. Iowa, I'd like to start. Iowa is a highly productive state in agriculture. If we were a home country, we would be a top 10 producer in the world. And there's only one state in the country that beats Iowa in terms of the dollar value of the ag economy. Does anybody know what that state might be? California. Yeah, that's right. And that's a state of 40 million people, 3 times our area, one of the 5th largest economy in the world. Iowa, in contrast, is a state of 3.2 million people. So we punch way above our weight. That's the good news. Okay, now what's the problem with that, John? Well, the system, as Karen mentioned, is out of balance. And I'll give you 3 examples of how it's out of balance and some of the things that we need to do. It's out of balance with respect to water quality. We have 1 billion pounds of nitrates going down our Mississippi and Missouri river systems and into our reservoirs. And that's creating an imbalance in terms of the ability for rural and urban islands to drink water safely, to recreate. We have over 750 impairments of state waters. About half of our water bodies are impaired. And that affects recreation and fishing and so forth. So the water situation is out of balance. Now, related to the water being out of balance is our soil. Soil health is fundamental to agriculture, to human health, and to the health of our water quality system. Healthy soils are soils that can infiltrate water. Healthy soils are soils that can retain water through droughts. That's important. And healthy soils provide additional nutrient density to foods, which is important. So our soil loss in this state, we're a leader in soil loss. We don't want to be a leader in soil loss. 10 times the amount of soil goes down our rivers and streams than Mother Nature is making at this point. Over 5 tons per acre. We've mined 1/3 of our topsoil in places, and we have among the richest soils in the world. More Class 1 soils in this state than any other place in the world. And so we have to protect, we have to nurture those soils. That's the second way the system is out of balance, and that requires doing cover crops and cropping systems in new ways to address the 23 million acres that we grow to corn and beans. The productivity is incredible. Number 1 in corn, number 1 or 2 in corn and beans, number 1 or 2 in ethanol, biodiesel, that's a $5 billion market. Number 1 in pork production, 1/3 of the nation's pork, 50 million animals per year. Number 1 in eggs, 60 billion eggs per year. So it's highly productive. The water, however, is out of balance. The soil loss, soil health is out of balance. And then the third thing we ought to think about in our rural communities, almost 60 of our rural counties are in population decline. And I would argue that population decline population is a very simple measure of community health. If you have a local county population that's not stable or slightly growing, then that is not reflective of a healthy community. That is a community that's not repopulating, regenerating with younger kids. They're moving away, and so that begins to reflect in the ability for the economy to continue in a way that I think we want to have healthy communities in rural Iowa. It's part of our heritage. So that's how the system's out of balance. How do we restore the balance? Well, I think there's 3 things we need to focus on. One is the ag plumbing. We, in this state, 23 million acres of corn and beans, about 14 million of it is tiled. And of the 14, another 7 of the 14 is tiled and controlled by drainage districts. We need to modernize that plumbing so we're not just draining away the water, we're conserving the water. We're managing the water for all the uses that we need. For filtration, for aquifer recharge, for flood mitigation and so forth. You get the idea. The system wasn't designed that way. The system 100 years ago, we've been building this system for over 100 years. The principal measure was drainage. And so now the world is changing and we've got to think about how do we modernize this system, and that's going to take state help and federal help to do that in concert with ag landowners. It's a really important aspect of our agriculture. We just have to look over at California to see what's happening. So, agriculture without water, it doesn't work so well. So that's the first part of the fix. The second part of the fix is soil health, and we got to figure out how to address soil health at scale. 60% of the ag land ownership in this state is absentee. And so we have the absentee ownership. We tend to think that the person driving the tractor is the person who owns the ground. More often than not, that's not the case. And so we have to bring together landowners, ag landowners, and farm operators around the idea of building soil health. It's so critical to what we do. And we've spent 50 years, mostly, I think, inadvertently, through our tillage practices and through our input practices and so forth, degrading the soil biology. The soil is supposed to be alive. I learned that in my soils class at the Yale Forestry School in 1992, and we're still learning these lessons. So that's the second way. The second thing we need to focus on is soil health. The third thing we need to focus on is diversification of what we grow and where we grow it. And you can think of that in different ways. You can think of that at very big scale. The farmer who's farming 5,000 acres here, up here in O'Brien County in corn and bean rotation. The corn and bean rotation by itself is not sufficient to maintain soil health. Those soil microbes and biology want to have a diversity of things grown on top of them, not unlike, you know, if you ate iceberg lettuce all the time, you get tired of that. And so we need to have third and fourth crops that we can introduce into the corn bean rotations, and some of that might require bringing livestock back onto the land. Well, how do we do that? That's a whole other subject. But the idea is we've lost some of the balance between the animals and the crops. And the animals are an important part of the system because the animals' rumens, for example, the biology in the rumens then are replicating and connected to the soil biology. So we're talking about systems. The third thing we need to, well, excuse me, at the big scale, we're talking about third and fourth crops. Mid-sized farming, I think we're talking about processing capacity, and I've heard here regionally we're adding some processing capacity for livestock. We have too much market control at the top in pork and cattle, and so the farm producer is caught in the middle. You've got to provide more competition and more choices at the mid-scale. Then at the bottom scale, you know, we have people from around the world coming to Iowa. In Des Moines, we have kids that speak 150 languages, or no, excuse me, from 150 nations around the world. And a lot of them are coming from farming nations. But can they farm? They don't have access to farm ground. Farm ground is so expensive that unless you're born into the farm lottery, you know, it makes it very difficult to get into this business. And so I want to figure out ways. On my card, I talk about farm parks, ag incubators, the idea that we can have farm scale at 1 and 2 and 5 and 10 acres. This ability to be able to have the next generation, whether you're black or brown or white, first generation like me, that doesn't have a farming background. If you farm, we ought to help people do that. We ought to think of ourselves maybe as the Silicon Valley of farming, where people from around Iowa can come back to Iowa, or people from around the world and country who want to farm can get into it. And we're talking about specialty production. We're talking about higher value crops. The corn and beans, that's going to be grown at scale. But what can we grow at smaller scale to address the 3.2 million people that live here, the school kids, the seniors, that, you know, we want to feed healthy, nutritious food too. And if we're not careful, the only place in parts of rural Iowa to get food will be Dollar General or Casey's. I mean, that's not really a healthy enough variety of foods. And so we got to think about the agriculture as a foundation of our economic development. It's really an important part of what we need to do. We got to build on the commodity system. I mean, that's the foundation of what we need to do, but by itself, it's not sufficient. So anyway, there's more parts to the story. I don't want to take too long here. The carbon pipelines, somebody might be curious about that. I don't think carbon pipelines qualify for eminent domain. I don't think they qualify as a public use. They're not a right-of-way, they're not a utility. So if the carbon pipelines are to be built, I think they need to be done voluntarily. I think they need to be done fairly. By fairly, I mean annual payments, not just like with the wind towers, not a one-time payment. Landowners get paid, counties get paid annually because they have to upgrade EMS systems. And the state ought to get a fund, a carbon mitigation fund, I think that would help. The funding from the pipeline, wheeling that carbon out of the state, just like in the utility business, where if you produce an electron and you want to take it to Chicago over somebody else's wires, you have to pay a toll fee. So we ought to have a toll fee that goes into a state fund, and the state fund helps farmers around the table here help do some of the things I'm talking about, the soil diversity. So that's a little bit about the carbon pipelines. The safety issue is important. I think we're playing with CO2, liquid CO2, which is heavier than air. If it gets out of the pipeline, a meteor hits the pipeline, that CO2 will roll across the landscape like a blanket. And what do we use CO2 in agriculture for? Does anyone know? I was just out at Marshalltown, and you've been there at a Marshalltown, the packing plant. That's how we euthanize animals. That's how we kill animals. So that's pipeline that needs to be done and built in a safe way that will be protective of local communities.
6 minutes.
And I'm at 6 minutes, or I have 6 minutes?
No, that's how long they CO2 the pigs.
Oh yeah, to kill the pigs. Yeah. So you know, it's just it's not something that should be taken lightly. We got to think about farm policy. The Farm Bill is a critical part of all this. $1.5 billion comes to Iowa each year for farm programs and conservation, and that compares to about a $9 billion state budget. So you get the idea. That's important money, and how we put that money to work. Why vote for me? I think I've got demonstrated leadership. I didn't talk a lot about my background, but I'm a soil and water commissioner for Polk County, and that has required really encouraged me to work upstream. You gotta work with people who are across the political spectrum. I had people in Des Moines saying, "Why are you going talking to that county supervisor? Why are you talking to that drainage engineer who lives up in Pocahontas County?" And it's like, well, how do you expect to get anything done? So leadership, you know, vision. I'm a vision person. I think in markets and systems. In Polk County, I led an effort for something called a saturated buffer. We were doing them one at a time in the state. It's a water quality practice. And I met with a series of engineers and others, said, "Why are we doing these one at a time?" And they looked at me and said, "John, we don't know either." So we reinvented that process. We just delivered in Polk County 50, more than the state had ever done in its history. And now we're going to do 100, and we're teaching other counties. So if we want to get to 23 million acres, which is what we farm, we've got to figure out how we work in systems. In terms of my values, as Karen mentioned, I think inquiry is very important. Rationality, you know, we don't want to be overly emotional. So having some humility is super important. You don't know all the answers. Spend as much time listening, perhaps more time than talking. Empathy, having empathy for people, I think is incredibly important for building trust with people. And having some patience, right? Change takes time. So anyway, it's great to be here. It's great to be here with the Admiral. We've had a number of stops together, and we're going to go touch northwest corner of Iowa tomorrow. That's going to be a lot of fun. I'm learning a lot as I go on the trail here. I woke up in Kasuth this morning. This is my 64th count. The Admiral's ahead of me, but I'm on his tail. And so, you know, this is how we learn, and this is how we share. And so please reach out. You've got my literature if you want to help with signs or ideas or volunteering. There's a sign-in sheet that went around. And thank you for your time. If we have time for a question or two, I would do that too.
In Sioux County, they're doing an effort, Ron Ryan is, to put pollinating plants along the roads.
Yeah.
Have you heard anything about that, or what do you think
I think it's a good idea. I think, you know, the monarch now, butterfly, is in danger of being listed, I think, as an endangered species. And to me, the monarch is the canary in the prairie, right? If we lose the monarch, that begins to tell us that the system is another indicator if the system is out of balance. And that may be happening because of pesticides, that may be happening because of habitat loss, but we should be concerned about that. And so part of what we need to do is figure out how that diversity I spoke about, adding the resiliency, the diversity, the inclusiveness to our system, we got to be able to try, or we should be trying very hard to figure out how do we protect the monarch, because what the monarch relies on, probably other pollinators rely on, and if we don't have pollinators in this state, what does that mean? That's not good news.
You also talked about cover crops, and
Yeah.
I don't know if you were about to, but I saw a video of it.
Yeah.
And so I incorporated it in my backyard, my
Yeah.
garden, and I can't believe what it did to my garden. I have a tassel of that thick just
Yeah.
from that 1 year
Of adding that organic
Yes.
matter. And that's an important
Yes,
part of what
it's
we've
just-
lost. Yeah.
I can't believe, and my crop, and no fertilizer.
Right.
And it's wonderful, it's beautiful,
Right.
and it's just 1 year.
1 year that you've seen that difference. Yeah. That's foundational. That's very important, our soil and our soil health.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thanks for sharing that. Yes,
I
sir.
was interested in your statement that the lower the population,
Yeah.
the population density, that somehow related to or vice versa, the soil quality.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the correlation or the causation is more related to the loss of population is a reflection of the scale of our agriculture. And you hear this informally in stories, you know, coming as I visit with people who say, you know, in our community we used to have so many people who had 80-acre farms, and we had, you know, 3 dozen farmers or 6 dozen farmers, and now it's one person who owns 5,000 acres. And so then we don't have the people at the store anymore. And now we used to have, you know, six grocery stores, and now we have 1, or we don't have any. And so that's a reflection of the scale of the agriculture, which is why I'm saying if we want to mint new farmers, we're not going to do it at the big end. We got to do it at the small end. And the soil health is important too, because the bigger you get, I'll give you one example. A farmer, Doug in Boone County, he's one of the biggest operators. He's almost like his own co-op. And he invited me to come out. He came to a soil health focus group we had down in Boone County, in Beaver Creek, because I want to learn from the farmers. And he sat through the focus group, and he was there with his wife, and he was taking some, you know, flack from the other younger farmer guys. But at the end, he invited me to come out to see his farm. And I thought that was a good sign. So about 4 weeks ago, I went out to see him on a Saturday. And I met with him and his wife and their kids. And he said 2 things to me that were really interesting. One was, he said, John, in all the years I've been farming, it's 30% water and it's 2 degrees hotter. So I didn't have to tell him about climate change. He already knew it. But what was his response to climate change? I mean, we should be thinking about how do we respond to climate change and build that soil resiliency we were talking about, where the soil can actually infiltrate the more severe weather and hold that water for drought. And the next thing he said to me was, what is soil health, John? He didn't know what soil health was. And his connection, he had a disconnect. He was like, I don't have time for soil health. I have to farm 5,000 acres. I've got the best John Deere X9 tractor, and it goes 1,000,000 miles an hour, but he doesn't have time for soil health. So the bigger you get, the harder it becomes to learn something new. And he's 78. I've just turned 58 today. He says, I'm 20 years older than you, John, and the kids, I think the kids are ready to do this. But the 78-year-olds, it's harder for them to make the change, because they're like, look, I've spent my life building up this system, and now you're asking me to change. So that just gives you an example of the complexity of how we have to, in the face of climate change, figure out the soil, but it gets progressively harder to do if you have a really big operation. So maybe that ties into your, does that answer your question? Yeah. One last question, and then I'm going to turn it over to the admin.
I don't have a question, but I want to tell you, Primghar I went through.
Right.
Former student of ours.
Yes.
And they collected milkweed pods and
Yes.
they handed them out. And they
Nice.
put them on.
Yeah.
So they're helping.
That is important.
Not necessarily
Yeah.
that he's a Democrat, but
Yeah.
this is what he did.
Yeah, good. Thank you for sharing. Well, thank you everybody for your time today, and feel free to reach out later with questions, and I'll introduce the admin.
Happy birthday, John.
Thank you, Admiral.
John is going to be the Secretary of Agriculture. To do this, he's working against some bucks. If you can cut him a check, that's great, because he's doing this on a shoestring budget. It's just him telling you what he knows, and he knows a lot. So very proud to share the stage with him. Okay, everyone, if you need a seventh inning stretch, we'll go ahead and do that. My name is Mike Franken. I got to tell you a story about Primghar, Iowa. You know, in the course of discussing with what's important in life, people always use Peoria, Illinois. Hey, what are you doing here? And from Sioux County. Thank you. I'm touched. So people say, you know, Peoria, Illinois. You know, it's got to be what's important in Peoria. I always use Primghar. It was just better for me to say, and I knew this town when I was growing up, I thought, and I enjoyed it, and I just thought it was such an idyllic little town, and this was my reference place. Why is it important to Primghar? And so I would expect some place, whether they're in the Gaza Strip or in Uzbekistan or in Germany, they're looking up, where's Primghar? So now they probably know. Thank you for having me here. Thank you, ma'am, for very much for inviting me, Karen. And let me have 3 minutes of your time to give you a little background on myself, and then I'll be happy to answer your questions. And sorry if I'm turning my back on you. I'm trying to be global and everything here. All right, so born and raised Sioux County, Iowa, western Sioux County, hard up against the Rock River, a little place. Primghar would be very big compared to Lebanon, Iowa, which is about 6 or 7 hounds. It was about 40 people growing up. 11 of them were in our family. The Sheldons had 9 next door, so you get an idea. There was just a couple houses. But it was home for me. It was the type of, it's life-defining. Small house, lots of kids, work to do for everybody. My dad came back from World War II, a wounded vet, knew how to work with his hands. All my lineage were farmers, sod hutters. First house was made out of sod hut. Animals on one side, people on the other. A chin wall in between so you stay warm in the wintertime. That's how they lived. And they built farms out of it. My mom's family had 4 farms by the time I was in high school. My dad's family had a couple farms as well. Today, my generation, none of us farm. Isn't that interesting, how that happens? And some people, some of the kids stayed in Sioux Center, Sioux County, Rock Valley, etc., but they just didn't turn to farming. It's just the way things are. As John said, the farms got bigger, the people got fewer. My mom was a one-room schoolhouse teacher. My dad wisely married her. She, not necessarily wisely, married him. But they proceeded to have kids, 9 of them. I was the last one. We lived in a small house, lots of kids, a lot of work to do. I grew up in a machine shop, working on farms, working construction, even milk at the Sandbolt farmhouse here, outside of Carmel, Iowa. Started working in a slaughterhouse at age 17. Became a foreman in the rendering plant at 19. Took a test, got a scholarship, sourced off to college, and majored in engineering. Became an engineer in physics, mostly in the U.S. Navy. Was a ship captain, commodore of a whole bunch of ships, land forces commander in a combat theater. Started that POW MIA agency that you've got the flag across the way there. I was the first director of that. That was my flag. I named it, organized it. To this day, I think it's the only agency that was started under budget and reached his congressional performance parameters on the first year. I know how to get things done in Washington because early in my career, I got yanked up to Washington. Here I am, a farm kid, I know nothing about it. I'd only been to Washington once before in a family vacation many years ago in an 8-foot Dreamer camper with like 7 kids in it. You can imagine. No air conditioning, of course, in the summertime. I remember that. But here I am in Washington working in the hallowed halls of Congress. Worked for a senator as his military legislative assistant, his foreign policy person, his ag, and his science advisor. And I learned how to get things done. The deal there was get it done, don't worry about the party. Get it done. Move the needle a little bit. It doesn't have to be a clear winner. When it's a clear winner, there's a clear loser. And you develop adversaries in doing that. There's many things to get done in the congressional sphere, which is move the needle a little bit better. Little things like, let's negotiate pharmaceutical prices for Medicare, Medicaid. Let's do that. That improves a whole bunch of lives, a whole bunch of situations for many people. It's not changing the medical system, it's fixing things incrementally. That's how I believe. Later on in my career, worked in the front office in the Bush administration and DOD, my quiet time with Mr. Grumpy Rumsfeld, and finished my time in legislative affairs as Obama's chief of legislative affairs, heading up the department and the authorization and the appropriation shop, learning how to push bills across the United States that for industry purposes, for congressional district, for work, for science, R&D, and a whole mixture of things, and it was very enlightening and a great opportunity. I submitted my request to resign from the U.S. military, worked when I was in Stuttgart, Germany, having served quite a long time, just shy of 4 decades, not really desiring to work in the front office of the Trump administration, or working in the high levels of DOD. As a 3-star admiral, there were very few jobs for me to do, and I would have ended up doing that. It was a choice in life. I'll hold to it that was a good choice. And, but I did, as a civilian, come back and help them use running a study that looked at asymmetric ways one nation or entity can disrupt the United States using media manipulations, cyber, and a whole other things. So I feel like I'm very much engaged with this country still. I very much want to represent this country from a rural Iowa roots to a national security roots and everything in between. This I think I can do. One of my watchwords is I'm all about getting things done and not letting the party step in my way. I'm not about party politics. That has caused us to get a severance amongst each other, amongst family members, etc. For example, that PACT Act that just came forward, where veterans were to be treated for the ailments as a result of toxic fumes coming off burn pits. Nobody had a problem with that. That had already been passed. And when it came back because of a technical problem, it got nullified because party politics got involved, got engaged. It's ridiculous. And because, many other reasons, the Senate stayed in session, is going to stay in session for another week. Senator Grassley, who I intend to beat, said, you know, this is terrible because I'm missing a family reunion because we have to stay in office, and because Schumer's, the Democrats are overworking us or something. That kind of bothered me because I missed a lot of reunions, a lot of holidays, and I'm not alone. There's a whole bunch of people over there that did the same thing, listed on your memorial. Many of you are veterans. Many of you who worked in business. You miss holidays. You miss reunions. You miss funerals. You miss weddings. I did the same thing. My wife waited for us to get married until I had a hole cut in the side of the ship and I couldn't go anywhere. That's true. I could have got a zillion stories of her just buying 3 tickets for herself and our 2 kids and not buying a ticket for me because I could never make the doggone vacation. Listen, Chuck Grassley, the business of running this government overrules your problems. And if you don't think it is, maybe you've been in office too damn long. Just think. All right, I'm here to serve you. I will put myself in your shoes every day of the week. And I like Primghar a lot. And thank you to O'Brien County. My second home was Lamar's in many respects. And I had an aunt living there. And it's where I brought my first ever to the movie house. Remember those things? And I feel like Northwest Iowa is my home. My home is in Sioux City. I'm a resident of Woodbury County, right downtown on Pierce Street. And that's where I'll stay as your senator. First time ever. Not only will I be the most senior military officer ever elected to the U.S. Senate in the history of our country, I'll be the first senator who's a resident in Northwest Iowa. And that will have a lot of benefit. Okay, questions please. I'm at your beck and call. Sir.
With your military background, you're entering into a combat, if you will, in the political arena with Grassley and a group of Republicans that see no bounds of fairness in how they fight. What's your battle plan for approaching Grassley in this campaign?
Did everybody hear? It's going to be a knife fight. Are you ready for it? What's your plan? Well, first of all, I've been in more of those tussles than anybody in the Senate. So, take it with a little bit of humor, because no one's shooting at me yet, although I always, in this world, I'm always looking at the door, and I'm always wondering where the exit is. The numbers to win are very favorable. There was a time when it was, Franken, do you really want to take on Chuck Grassley? And I believe in my heart of hearts that if you really want to run for office, because you want to be a senator, is not the person that ought to run. You ought to run for office because you've got the experience, the work ethic, the education, the resume. You got to come prepared to go to work for day one, and the health, and your spouse has got to say, okay. That's very important, to run for office. And those of you who've run for office before, I thank you. And those who are holding office, double thank you. The numbers for our winning, never has Chuck Grassley been below 50% his approval rating. He's got 99% name recognition. Everybody knows him. His record is well established. He was a well-managed senator initially in his career, and obviously things have changed. Tom Harkin was his bromide that kept him in line, I think, in many respects, and perhaps, I don't know what's happened, but now he's a part of it, is he not?
Nothing is Trump.
What that man said. and other things. I mean, he started earlier than that, 2005-ish, 2008-ish, party line, says one thing, does another. Pharmaceuticals, matter of fact, his 2006 bill was listed by the Des Moines Register as worse than nothing, which is probably not high praise. My job is to, number one, outwork them, stay civil, which is very important, stay professional, add a little humor, do a 99 county tour where everyone who wants to come in may. No restrictions. This isn't a highly designed audience. And I thank you for everyone coming. It's a nice big audience. Thank you for Primghar. He has a litany of things where we can say, is this right? Is the agricultural market that we have in Iowa today advantageous for a 2-century farm? Yes or no? Most of my farmer friends in high school, etc., who are now getting close to retirement, that 1-century farm will say, oh, absolutely not. The margins are so refined, so small, they couldn't possibly do it over again, and their kids don't want to do it. My job is to change the business environment in Iowa, change the business environment in Primghar, give a shot to agriculture, to make them hand in glove with the environmentalists. We can do this. We can certainly change the order of things and make it more viable. Most of my friends in Northwest Iowa are Republicans, okay, most all. And they've called me in and say, hey, we ought to have a conversation. And the guy that I lugged hogs with for many years is now one of the largest farmers in Northwest Iowa. And he looked at me with a tear in his eye and he said, I wish that we didn't even have a farm bill. And I wish the big ag wouldn't be involved in this because I don't know if I can withstand the ups and downs physically, mentally. It's killing me. He's a big farmer. And moreover, he said, I can't get my kids, I've got 4 of them, to take over the farm. And I'm considered a rich man. What's wrong? I don't know.
Are you going to hold him accountable for his flip-flops on the Judiciary Committee when he chaired it?
Yes.
Yeah, good.
So what he's speaking of is when Chuck Grassley was chairing the Judiciary Committee, Merrick Garland came up for a vote to sit on the Supreme Court. He had already been approved by a lower district court, appellate court, with a high margin, 90-some to nothing. And he was held in abeyance for 11 months just because they wanted to control that nomination. Fast forward, late in the session of Trump, when a vacancy shows up, 26 days left, although 65 million presidential votes have been cast, 65 million, to a presidential vote that we found out the other party won, they fast-tracked Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the chair. That's just not fair. I don't care what you say, fairness is a thing. It's a fairness in combat, it's a fairness in life. Don't do that. That's not Iowa values. Yes, sir.
We'll be paying for Trump's appointments for years to come, lower levels too. But my question is there any legal way to stop foreign countries from buying Iowa farmland, or corporations in New York City that have these fund managers that have people who own farmland who've never set foot in Iowa? Is there any way to control that?
Yes, but some antitrust issues come into play, which we seem to ignore. Matter of fact, I don't know what year it was, I'm reaching back, but the highest recipient of farm subsidies one year was an insurance company in Boston.
Right. I know the checks they get it's going on, it's crazy.
It's absurd.
It's legal, but it's not right.
Well, and regarding foreign entities, like, what is it? One in 4 hogs in America are owned by an American hog business. 3 out of 4 owned by someone else, right? Is that it?
Well, Smithfield is owned by a Chinese company, right?
So China Pork is a company.
Yeah.
The chief executive officer for China Pork, don't correct me on the year, 2018 or whatever, made more money than any of the billionaires in America. Single man, Chinese guy. So here's an interesting story. I don't mean to make people upset.
No.
But I lived a big life, and I recognize things that are odd. One was in the 60s and 70s and 80s, the United States mined bauxite out of West Africa. We built a port, we built a train track that ran to the mine, we stripped the hell out of the mine, brought the raw bauxite on a truck, on a ship, shipped it to Venezuela, smelted it into ingots, brought the ingots to Houston for manufacturing. That's called resource exploitation of Africa and of Venezuela. No controls, nobody got rich there, except for a couple of strong men, and America built their industries. Today, the hog manure is left here. The water is used here. The owners are not really owners, they're operators of somebody else's business, and the profits go elsewhere. It's inverse exploitation.
Is there any way to control it?
Sure there is. Sure there is. But the land buying is done by a couple stages remote, hiding that up. We've got to be more, we got to be far more strident in this. We've got to get engaged. Yeah, it's a problem. And it runs up the cost of our farmland. Sioux County farmland goes for well over $20,000 an acre. And I don't know how you work that math, but I don't know how you make that profitable. It's really hard to do that profit-loss equation.
I'm not a farmer, but it pisses me off.
For good reason. For good reason.
Well, yeah, I would just like to know how many acres the Chinese do own in Iowa, because it's far greater than we would ever think.
Well, you know, there was a time.
As you just said, they have so many different little corporations, and they look, well, like Smithfield, it looks like, oh, an American company. Well, it's not an American company. So where do we go? I mean, how do you figure that out? How many acres are owned by?
It can be done. Mr. Google can help.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you'd be quite shocked if you found out the numbers.
I will begin a project to look it up. John, you got any sense of that?
Yeah, you know, we have corporate farm ownership laws in this state. So, you know, I think the bigger concern isn't as much the land as it is the animals. There's corporate ownership, but there's no restrictions on corporate ownership. So as the Admiral said, what's happening in the hog industry, as an example, is most of those animals are not locally owned. They're all owned by the vertical integration. And the companies exert way too much market control.
And all these farmers, they're just managers.
They're just serfs or whatever you want to do.
It's also happening with row crop land,
Yeah, yeah.
to a lesser extent.
Geez, let's walk away from that.
Assuming that you send Grassley back home to retirement, what is your position on term limits? Will you limit yourself to 6 years or 12 years? Or?
The question has to do with term limits. Now, Chuck Grassley's for term limits. No, that's he said so.
Yeah.
Joey, did he say so?
Where's the
He
bill?
did. Joey is my Republican tracker, and he said yes, he did. So it's true.
Well, where's the bill he's sponsoring? Sorry.
Term limits are a thing, but unless you're really valuable. Just kidding. In the military, you know, we say if you think you're too valuable to be transferred, stick your head in a water bucket and see if the hole's still there when you pull it out. No such thing. So term limits, you know, 10 years ago I would say, forget about term limits, just elect good people. But because money has become so important in who gets elected, that you've got to put constraints, I think, on people's time. And if I could be suggestive of a amendment to the Constitution, I would say House members do 4 years, 3 terms. Senate do 6 years, 2 terms. President do a single 5-year term. Judiciary do 18 years or 15 years. 12 years, and you're done. And don't come back. Once you're in, don't come back. And you may never lobby. You may never be involved in congressional affairs for a corporation. This is called service. And let's look at family members who are lobbyists. Does anybody know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, there's a significant level of lobbying going on in my opponent's family. Now, I got it. If the person's really qualified to do that, fine. But if you're doing it because you can sell time to see father, I'm not so sure that's good. And in Iowa, that would be a real clincher to me. Nobody in my family will be a lobbyist. So yes, I'm for term limits because we can't get money out of politics.
If we get term limits, is there any way to stop the lifetime benefits to the rest? You're increasing the number of people with lifetime
Well,
benefits.
let me get to that. Okay, so to answer your question, I can't say I'll limit myself to 2 terms because my wife may not limit me to 2 terms. She may say 1 and done. This is another hellacious deployment for me, but she's a sport. She's gotten along, been a great supporter over the years. And she's usually here. She's home taking care of COVID patients. So, okay. Next question, please.
What do you think about the cinema and the controversy about the tax loophole, et cetera, taxes in general?
So this audience should be very concerned about Social Security and Medicare. We don't give that enough attention because those of us getting Medicare, and I'll be there in November 8th, Election Day.
94 days.
94 days. My mom and dad planned 64 years ago that their son would be available on his 65th birthday to serve as a senator, and they timed it. That's called planning. That's the rhythm method. Just kidding. Just kidding. So, taxes. Social Security, those income dollars over $147,000, no one pays Social Security on that. Did you know that? You make $1 million, your rate of paying Social Security is no higher than that rich guy down the street, vice president or big farmer who's made $147,000. You don't pay a penny more. Most of my friends that are making $1 million incomes could care less about paying Social Security. Yet, in the United States, we have problems with Social Security. When your children become that age, unless we do something, we are going to have to reduce Social Security because it's no longer solvent. We must change that. The sooner we change that, the better. That's an easy one. And don't do any kind of fancy notching. Just release the cap. You pay Social Security to ad infinitum. Taxes. So the reconciliation bill, as I recall, is a flat tax of 15% for corporations. You can't get out of it. Minimum, I mean. That's a good thing. We shouldn't have corporations that have billions of dollars of income that pay not a penny tax, income tax. We shouldn't. They've not done this in the past. Back when America really got built in the 50s and 60s, this huge, when we controlled 40% of the world economy, tax rate for the uber wealthy was very, very high. Did you hear anybody complain about that? No. The wage scale between the chief executive officer and the lowest paid person was what? That's a Yale PhD. What was what? 20 times or something like that?
Less than it is today.
Not what it is today. Today, it's off the scale. I mean, the highest income of someone in the medical community in America wasn't a doctor. He was an HMO president, and it was $198 million in a single year. He doesn't treat anybody. He's an administrator. His job is to maximize profits by minimizing treatment and the payments made, right? So he wants to make sure he doesn't do anything more for you than he absolutely has to, yet gets paid the most. It's a hell of a business. In my view, government ought to be that big block that you can step up on. Everybody can step on it, whether you're with disabilities or not. It is predicated on clean air, clean water, safe food supply, a good education, health care, and safety. Safety from violence, safety from crime, safety from our neighbors, safety from the other political party. That's government's role. And to monitor, be the referee, and so many other things. Government has a role to be a referee, to call fairness. That's my view. It's all about common sense and fairness. And it's not about political party. It's not about scoring points, making one person look bad so you look good. That's what Russia does. That's a traditional Russian tale. How do you make your neighbor look bad? Well, you know, the Russian farmer digs up a genie bottle, and he rubs it, and the genie pops out and says, "Your lucky day, Russian farmer. Anything you want. But your neighbor gets twice of what you get." And the Russian farmer thinks about it and says, "Take my eye." That's how we think about things in politics today. Let me suffer, let my constituents suffer, so the other party suffers more. It's a crazy world. Stop it, America. And the leadership team that brought us from a congealed society in January of '02, remember that? After 9/11, we were together as a nation. 90-some%. We could do no wrong. Is the same leadership team that has now brought us as divided as we are in our families. Where in some rural counties, nobody wants to put a Franken bumper sticker on their car because they're afraid it's going to get keyed. It's crazy. Where I would expect Chuck Grassley's going to find an opportunity to denigrate that I served in the military for a long time. I don't know. Who knows? Nothing's sacred in it. It's just fun. Heldy? Are you kidding me? Here. All right, college roommate. I haven't seen him in ever. Couldn't help it. Why don't you go back to wherever the hell you were? Oh yeah, that's good. I think he's a Republican, but that's okay. I don't ask. When I have staff members, I don't ask for political affiliation. Don't ask. It's not important to me. It's not important. What's important is you want to work, you want to do best for Iowa, the constituency, and the nation. And you want to work hard. Next question, please. I don't want to hold you very night. I've got another engagement tonight, too. So.
I've got one to say, but I don't use the name of the politician that when I first started walking, we had parties and I got the meetings. And so I had the charts. So I've got that one guy that as good as I do, I read your stuff all over and I do this the opposite. That's fine, no thing. I can say somebody else is doing it.
Oh, you mean with me?
No, and all I was, no, it was, Steve King and I used to have to go on that one.
Oh, yeah. It's a good one.
But you can't, there's not you can't just know against everything. But you can't. The Democrats got some good ideas, the Republicans got some good ideas. Try to pick out the best.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there was when I started out on Capitol Hill, and I'm a farm kid in King Arthur's Court. I'm working a bunch of Harvard Law Review folks, people that work in congressional affairs all their lives. I don't know. I don't even remember taking a civics class, but I learned. I learned through repetition, and I had good people looking out at me. But at that time, I went in and out of John McCain's office, Orrin Hatch's office, John Warner's office, I didn't even check in on the front desk. John McCain, I said, hi, John. I mean, we were friendly across party lines. The person I worked for was Ted Kennedy, of all people. I was told to get a job on Capitol Hill with the Democrat that swings the biggest hammer. And Ted Kennedy was chairman of the Sea Power Subcommittee and ran a lot of things in DOD, so I knocked on his door. I didn't know anything. Somebody said, he won't hire you. He doesn't have military people in his office. He invited me in. Within 40 seconds, I'm sitting on his couch. He's smoking a gnarly old cigar with a spittle dripping out of it. And he says, hey, so you're a Navy guy, right? I said, I am. I'm a lieutenant commander in the Navy, blah, blah, blah. And he interrupted me. He said, did you know my brother was in the Navy? Yes, Senator. I saw the movie. I read the book. I aware that. He said, well, I really wanted. So that began my relationship with Ted Kennedy. And he told me then, he said, listen, if I ever ask you to do something that you're not comfortable doing because of where you are, he knew where I was from. He knew how I was raised. Politics were never mentioned in the Franken household growing up. Never. Couldn't be farther from the thing. He said, don't do it. Just tell me you're not going to do it, and I get it. And I never had a situation where that was the case. Although I did cross swords with cranberry growers, I must say. But that's another story. To do what's right for people. And you don't have to be 100%. I tell you, there's a couple of things in the Democratic docket that I disagree with. I don't think you ought to wipe out all college debt because you're treating a symptom of a bigger problem. The bigger problem is states no longer pay a sufficient amount of higher education. We've got too much cost associated with education on the frivolousness of education versus actually getting it. We have loans that are at an interest rate which are ridiculous, and a student can borrow $100,000 without another signatory, but yet they can't rent a car. It's crazy. I mean, it's designed to be hard on students and make them pay for a long time out. Education is one of those things in the building blocks. It should be an easy thing to attain. And I'll tell you, I would not be a 3-star admiral today. Had that opportunity to score well in a test. I was kind of a radical in high school. I worked a lot. Didn't do what I should have been doing a lot of times. I had 6 sisters. I was scared of them. But I had a physics instructor that said, take this class. And by the way, besides taking this class, take this math class too. Okay, I will. And I did. And I did well on a test. Got a scholarship. Changed his life. That platform. High school in Iowa used to be in the 99th percentile in the nation. It isn't anymore. Because we haven't put our money on what's important. We've got to do better. Last question, please. I'll sit around for pictures real quick and then I'm off the road. Sir?
This is kind of off the wall, but and I realize you're running for the Senate, not the House, but there's a House resolution, I think it's 51, that would make the District of Columbia a state. What's your thoughts on that?
So there is a resolution in the House of Representatives that says the District of Columbia has 700 and some thousand people. So it has more people than the Wyoming, North Dakota, Vermont. Okay. So the point is, let's make it a state, and in doing so, we'd have 51 states, and it's about 90% or 80% Democrat. So it's a way to boost the Democrats. I don't have a strong opinion, frankly. I've lived in Washington, D.C. Well, I've had 9 jobs or so in Washington, D.C. inside the Beltway, which I assure you all is about 7 too many. But once you get that on you, you go back. It is a great way to balance out What we have an imbalance though, right now 1/3 of the senators in the US Senate control 2/3 of the, or represent 2/3 of the population. Ergo, 2/3 of the senators represent 1/3 of the population. So there's an inherent unfairness as it stands now. And it's reflected in the House of Representatives where we try to balance that out. But the Senate does votes on things which are unique to only the Senate. And there it stays out of balance. So from that perspective, it's a favorable thing to do. Maybe we ought to combine the Dakotas. Keep it 50. I don't know. Just kidding. Just kidding. My South Dakota friends. Yes, yes, ma'am.
I just want to, before you start pictures, say just a little bit.
Oh, yes, please.
You've heard him speak. I hope you're as impressed as I have been. I think you should be. And now, yes. And I'm going to feel quite confident that the majority of the people in this room on November 8th intend to vote a certain way. But I want to tell you, that ain't enough. That's not good enough. I'm going to challenge each and every one of you that support him to talk to people. We know what area of the state we live in. You need to challenge people to do their homework. Research the Admiral. Find out what he has to offer us as a state. And then put your money where your mouth is. And I'm going to tell you right now, I have recently put my money where my mouth is. I have been not working for a long time because my husband is a wonderful provider. So I've been able to just have the easy life. As he laughs. I'm the world's worst farm wife, to the point where one time I didn't even know how many hog buildings we had. That bad of a farm wife. It's not pretty. But on Monday, I accepted a position with the Admiral's campaign. For 3 months, I'm going to have a boss. I have not had a boss for like 27 years. So if I can do that, you guys can talk to your neighbors. And I want to hear you doing it. I want you to put signs up. Whatever your comfort zone is, find it and do it. We all have to wake up November 9th after celebrating your birthday, celebrating sending you to the Senate.
Connor, where are you from? Where's your hometown?
St. Charles, Iowa. I go to Simpson, and I am a Democrat. So.
Nobody heard of St. Charles. Just kidding. Just kidding. CJ, where are you from?
Atlanta.
Atlanta. I'm from Lebanon, Susan. That kind of gets you a drift of where we're all from. And that runs through our staff. We don't have hired guns from Washington, D.C. I'm the first candidate that we've had that Iowa's chosen. Did you know that? So the way it was in the primary, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee in Washington, D.C. has heretofore chosen their desired candidate to win the primary. There were other people in the race. I came in last and said, we've got to win this race. We must, we must, we must. If we win this Senate race, chances are we're going to go to Washington, D.C. with more Democratic congressmen. A very high probability, because we're mutually interwoven and supportive in our positions. We're all pretty much people of Iowa, rural Iowa. And that's a good thing. So stay out of our race, Washington, D.C. Stay out. Plus they were 0 for 4, but that's... So they stayed out, and here we are. Resorts to the top of the pack after the primary, and we're going strong. And I'm a sensor and a feeler of things. International affairs, the Klan leader sitting underneath a banyan tree with an AK-47 telling them that you need to do this and hoping he doesn't shoot me, etc., etc. How to move ships, how to make things happen, how to sense the well-being of the crew. My sense of the well-being of this state is we've got great hope. And we're looking for a sea change, as we use in a maritime term. A change of course, a different leadership quadrant. And my job is to help do that. And if you can help with social media, calling your friends, calling your families, please invite those people who are Republicans to come chat with me. I am happy to do that. I will go on any radio station, TV, group, farmers group, and have a conversation, and be mostly listening, and give you my sensibilities. I want to be very much representative. Yes, sir.
I've had many conversations with Republicans, and my votes were split, but when their grandfather and their great-grandfather and their father, they just get so ingrained in their thinking that they just, it's hard, I'm going to try this, it's really hard to persuade some of the people up there.
Okay, so the guy I grew up with in Lebanon Island, we fished for crappie, we swam naked in the Rock River, we went boating, we went pheasant hunting, we grew up together. He hugged me and said, "The most successful guy ever out of Lebanon Island. Love you like a brother. I'll never vote for you, you damn Democrat."
I know exactly. I know
But his wife, Eva, after they were talking and stuff, I motored on over to Eva and said, "Eva, where are your kids?" "Oh, so-and-so, so-and-so." "Where's your grandkids? Where are they going to school?" "Oh, are any of them going to come back?" "Eva, we need to change Iowa so that somebody wants to come back to Lebanon. We want to give you broadband. We want to give you a different type of job. We want to make sure that, like so many other families, the guy works 2 jobs on the farm, in town. The spouse works at a hospital because they need health care, right? And they're scratching out an existence. Trying to farm, not really, renting farmland, using people's gear, in essence a hired man for somebody else. That's not a way to live. Who wants to come back to that? It has to be a life with dignity and a life with promise.
I agree.
So Eva is my interlocutor.
You're connected.
Eva changes things. She walks up there and says, "You know what? Grassley generally, for the last 63 years, is here." 63 years. And what's gone really well? Matter of fact, in the United States, your life expectancy's actually gone down. Maladies later in life have actually gone up. The wealth disparity has gotten bigger. Farmers, I can't stand it. I do soil quality or water issues with Stimson Center in Washington, D.C. with my science background. And I can't stand it when I listen to a conference where they villainize farmers. Farmers in many cases can't help it. They're pushed, they're getting crushed by the farm economy, which maximizes in just the business lanes that they only know. We need to change the equation. You can't change the future life cycle of Primghar with the same business equation. Something needs to change. Got to be more broad-minded on things. You know, Chuck Grassley signed the infrastructure bill. He had a moment of mental clarity. But do you know of anything in the infrastructure bill that did anything out of the ordinary for the state of Iowa? Anything? No, the community health center in Sioux City, that was Tom Harkin. The highway running from Des Moines down through Ottumwa, etc., that was Tom Harkin. All these community centers, bridges, culverts, etc., etc. I walked into a bar at Sioux Center. This isn't a joke. This is not a joke. It's with your brother.
They have a barn center.
The back door.
You've said something 4 times now. Your allotment's up.
If you can get Claude to be quiet.
Yeah, so walked into a bar and the bartender goes, "Hey everyone, there's an admiral from here and he's a Democrat and he's running to be your next senator." So all those college kids at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night looked. Someone said, "Why are you a Democrat?" And I said, "Well, I am from here. I remember Dordt College very well when it was still a college and now it's a university. But Democrats to me gave us women's suffrage, rural electrification, the GI Bill, Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, you name it. Can you name anything the Republicans have done for you or your parents or your grandparents that changed the direction of their lives? Name one. Jeopardy moment. Go at it. And they're dutiful young people. They all went at it. You know, they're Sioux County young people. They don't drink. Be nice. And finally they gave them, I said, no. It's clean air, or it's clean water bill, 1972 at threat of veto that Nixon signed. Somebody said, that's good, right? I said, yeah, but Trump nullified it. And I gave a speech to him. Listen, you grew up in a family, in a religion, in a school, in a thought process, in an occupation, and now you're in college. Think about what's best for your life. Many of those things that your parents and you were born into are absolutely 100% right. But if things need adjustment, have the mindfulness to change. The mindfulness to change. We have to. Okay?
Yeah, who would vote for a Republican now, especially women?
Yeah.
Did you video that? That would get split. You did that last week, but that would be
Usually in northwest Iowa, I don't go down that. But there's no. You're going to be a Mary Tyler Moore.
Worse than that.
I'm your ally. There's no light between us.
Don't tell me what to do. I don't walk behind my husband. I walk beside him. Grassley, you take that and you stick it.
He's been trying to succeed since 1972 when he did that on TV. Remember, did you ever see the cut? He finally succeeded. But I anticipate we will codify reproductive rights in America and make it. Everybody. This is a very difficult individual choice. The government doesn't get involved in this.
Yeah,
No business. No business. This is a critical choice.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
So,
And it's none of their business.
yes, ma'am.
I work at the Democratic booth here at Primghar at the fair, and we have a lot of young people come up, and we're very interested. So as Karen said, we need to get the young people too, because they're out there. We can't call them stupid. We can't say,
Oh, God,
you
no.
don't know anything. They do. They are up on a lot of things.
And
a young man-
Connor, she just called you stupid, I think.
both Dordt and Northwestern have Democratic clubs now.
So the head of the Republican Party at Dordt College is a dear friend of mine. I worked with her last time. She's no longer Republican. And I had nothing to do with it. She did what so many people should do. You should learn what's best for your future and for your country, for your family, for your lineage. Simple as that.
We had a 15-year-old worked in the booth with us, and she
Yeah.
Her friend was 18 years old, and she was the one that got her involved.
Who was the woman in Mount Air at the parade the other day? She was 9 years old.
Something like that, yeah.
She was unbelievable. She was on step with the topics, etc. She asked me about something about Ukraine. I was absolutely stunned. She's 9 years old. Yeah, don't underestimate the youth of today. They work differently, but they work.
All you have to do to reinforce that is look at what happened with the recent vote in Canada.
Yep.
And the people marching in support of that. Young people are engaged, big time.
Yeah, they don't come to events like this because they see it like this.
Okay, did you see, when it started in this, did you see more young people involved, or do you think they more involved now?
Their involvement is behind the scenes.
They're in the closet.
Probably don't want to use that term. She said they're in the closet.
I bet some.
No, they're there, they're informed, they're reading, they're talking on other means. But what we need to do is ensure that the hugely partisan Supreme Court, which will affect their future lives, they got to know where the etymology, where that came from. And you know, Supreme Court justices can be impeached.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is such a thing as that.
A ton of lower court justices too, a ton.
Yeah.
What's your thought on expanding the number of people on the Supreme Court?
Yeah, we're not. Okay. So the question is, what do I think about expanding the size of the Supreme Court? Let's just limit when they retire.
Yeah.
And otherwise, we're going to be doing a tail chase. This is a significant problem, though. But I suggest we hold them to, and we make it possible to impeach them. So, to your point with the young people, they need to know that it's a deal. You got to have a significant majority. Your vote matters. And it just doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter at the senator and the congresswoman perspective. It matters secretary ag, county supervisor, library board, school board. We have been neglectful of these. I'll tell you a story. The rabbi in Sioux City said, Franken, do 3 things for me. Get a pheasant hunting license, go hunting with me. Okay, Rabbi, he's about this tall. I think I'll have to carry the shotgun for him. Number 2, go to a university, or go to all the universities in town, in the state, talk to them about civics, foreign policy, getting engaged. And lastly, go to a different place of worship every weekend. Synagogue, evangelical, Catholic, Lutheran, where I was from, any kind of church, Muslim, etc. One weekend I went to Muslim, animist, Jewish event, and the Eid with Muslims. No biggie, comfortable and all. Been to them many times throughout my life. Not an issue. But what was really stunning to me was going to one of the largest churches in my home county, Sioux City, Woodbury, where at the 100-minute mark of the Sunday morning, the minister went through the elections that were coming up and who in the congregation was running in that election and where they're going to be after church for you to have a talk with them and drop off your donations. And what races were not being filled where we need people such as you, and name some names, to go down there and talk about who's going to run. Because we need people in these offices. Now, I don't know about you, but Peace Lutheran Church in rural Rock Valley, Iowa, we didn't talk about that in church. That never came up. Political party, political positions, it just wasn't the thing. But to actively do it in church was a rather stunning to me. So unless like-minded individuals, people who believe in the separation of church and state, people who believe in a broad-mindedness about what's best for everybody, not just those in the pew next to you, I suggest we get engaged in local elections, more so than we